Normally, my husband, a strong and hard-working man, was a pillar of our family. We had a stable routine, laughter, and dreams for the future. Then, one day, everything changed. My husband had a terrible accident at work. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was at home, busy preparing dinner, when I received that call. The voice of his colleague was trembling, and each word felt like the ground was giving way beneath my feet. They told me he had had a serious accident and had lost his arm. I was in shock, unable to comprehend how such a thing could happen. When I arrived at the hospital, seeing him lying there with tubes and machines devastated me. My Marie, who had always been so strong, was now dependent on others. The doctors did their best, but the reality was that he would never be able to work again. This completely disrupted our lives. With only one income, our savings began to dwindle rapidly. At first, I tried to keep my chin up, to smile in front of my children, but the pressure was immense. Every day I woke up with a dull fear in my stomach, wondering how I was going to manage all of this. I started looking for a job, applying everywhere I could. It wasn't easy, especially with 3 children at home, but I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let my family sink. Finally, I found a job in a small company. The salary wasn't great, but it was a start. I was determined to support my family and keep our heads above water. Entering this new environment, I thought it would be a chance to rebuild myself, to regain control of my life. But I soon realized that this new job wasn't going to be as simple as I had hoped. The environment was pleasant, but the atmosphere in the office was a little more complicated than I had imagined. I was there to work, but I didn't yet know how much my life would change in this new environment. Once I started working, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Every morning, I dressed carefully, trying not to let the accumulated fatigue of the nights spent taking care of the children and my husband show. Arriving at the office, I was determined to give my best. I knew my family was counting on me, and I couldn't let them down. The first few days went well. I met some nice colleagues, and little by little, I adapted to my new role. I started taking on responsibilities to feel useful. However, over time, I noticed strange things. My boss, a charismatic man, seemed to pay particular attention to me. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but he kept asking me to stay after work to discuss various projects. These discussions became more and more frequent. I felt a tension in the air, a kind of electricity. Every time we were alone in his office, sometimes he complimented me on my work, but these compliments took a turn that made me uncomfortable. I didn't know how to interpret his behavior. Was it simply professional, or was there something else behind it? One evening, as I was about to leave, he asked me to stay a little longer. I did, thinking he needed help. The conversation started with mundane topics, but quickly he began to touch on more personal subjects. He told me about his life, his dreams, and I surprised myself by opening up a little. I wanted to believe that it was just a budding friendship, a way to find support in this workplace. But this friendship quickly took an unexpected turn. He began to flirt openly. I remember a moment when he touched my arm while laughing. My heart started beating faster. I knew I had to keep my distance, but I couldn't help being flattered. At that moment, I was so tired of all these responsibilities, of this constant stress, that the attention he paid me was almost comforting. However, deep down, a voice told me to be careful. I didn't want to betray my husband, especially after everything he had been through. But this inner struggle began to distress me. I felt like I was caught between my desire to be loved and my loyalty to my family. Each passing day became a new challenge. I promised myself to stay strong. I focused all my energy on my work and my children. But I knew that things couldn't stay that way. The tension was rising, and I wondered how long I could hold on before the situation became unbearable. The days passed, and the atmosphere between my boss and me became heavier and heavier. His insistent looks and smiles began to worry me. I tried to remain professional, but each interaction seemed charged with an invisible tension. He often offered me to stay late to finish projects, and I felt that it went beyond simple work. Near evening, after accepting another invitation to stay, I understood that this time he had another agenda in mind. We were alone in his office, and the air was saturated with a kind of palpable energy. He began to compliment me, talking about my beauty and my strength. I remember feeling a mixture of unease and excitement. I knew I had to be careful, but he was so charismatic that I couldn't help listening to him. Suddenly, he approached me, and there he broke the barrier I had put in place. In a low voice, he asked me if I wanted to take our relationship to the next level. My heart stopped. I was shocked and angry at the same time. I told him firmly that I couldn't do that I had a family, and that it couldn't happen. He reacted unexpectedly. Rather than accepting my refusal, he insisted, saying that he felt a connection between us. These words hit me like a slap. I didn't understand how he could be so selfish. It was as if he completely ignored my limits and my values. I explained to him that I wasn't interested, that I wasn't willing to compromise my family life for a moment of passion. After this refusal, his attitude changed dramatically. He became cold, distant, almost hostile. I could feel the change in the air. Each interaction was now tinged with tension, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells. I didn't know how I was going to manage the situation. The stress had become unbearable, and I feared that he would try to harm me in some way. Then, one day I received a message from him. It was an invitation to a work dinner. My instinct told me not to go, but I also wanted to keep my position at work. I was torn by a terrible dilemma, but after a few days of reflection, I decided to refuse, aware that I didn't want to put myself in an even more dangerous situation. That's when everything changed. A few days later, I was summoned to his office. My heart was pounding. I knew that something serious was happening. He looked me straight in the eyes and told me that he couldn't keep someone who didn't want to play the game. It was a shock. His threat was clear. I had done everything to stay true to my values, but now I risked losing my job. I found myself facing a difficult choice: to stay firm, and I knew that my decision could change the course of my life. The tension in the office was palpable when I found myself facing my boss. I knew that the situation was critical, and I felt my heart accelerate. He stared at me intently, his eyes filled with a cold determination. I told myself that I had to stay strong, that I couldn't falter now. After all, my family needed me. He started to talk to me, his voice calm but full of undertones. "You know, Tanya, I could give you great opportunities, but for that, you have to be a little more open." I could see where he was going with this. It was as if he was playing a game, and I wasn't ready to be his pawn. I replied with confidence, "I'm here to work, not to enter into a personal relationship. I have a family at home, and I'm not going to compromise everything I have for a job." I hoped that my words would reach him. but I could already see his gaze harden. After refusing to give in to his advances, I felt that something had changed. He started talking to me less, avoiding me. I knew that my decision not to play his game had consequences, but I couldn't regret my choices. The thought of my children, my husband, of everything I had built, gave me the strength to continue. Then, one morning, I received a letter of summons. My heart sank. I understood that he wouldn't waste time in making me pay for my refusal. Entering the office, I had the feeling that I was going to face a court. My boss was sitting behind his desk, an expression of authority on his face. Next to him was another person, a representative of human resources. He started talking, but his words resonated like background noise. I knew what was coming. He declared that given my recent refusals, he could no longer keep me in the company. My heart sank into my chest. It was the confirmation of my fears. I had tried to stay upright, and now everything was about to collapse. Anger flooded me, but I remained calm. "You can't do this to me," I said in a trembling voice. "I'm here to work, not to play your games." But my words had no impact. They had already made their decision. Leaving the office, I felt devastated but also relieved. I had stood my ground. I knew that I didn't want to work in such a toxic environment. But the reality hit me. I had just lost my job, and the financial pressure on my family was becoming unbearable. I now had to face the outside world, and I wondered how I was going to manage everything. Once at home, I took a deep breath before explaining the situation to my husband. I was afraid of his reaction, but I knew that I couldn't hide the truth from him. He was already so vulnerable after his accident. When I told him, I saw his face decompose. It was a mixture of sadness and frustration. But despite everything, he took me in his arms and reassured me. "We will get through this together," he murmured. This promise gave me some comfort, but the fear of the unknown persisted. I knew that I had to find a way to get us out of this, and quickly. The days that followed my dismissal were a real whirlwind. I got up every morning with a heavy melancholy, realizing that I no longer had a job. The financial pressure intensified, and I knew that I couldn't stand idly by. I had to find another job quickly to provide for my family. I started spending my days looking for job offers. The hours passed, and each refusal was a new disappointment. I sent resumes, I made calls, but nothing seemed to work. Sometimes I felt such a deep despair that I had trouble staying calm in front of my children. They didn't understand everything, but they could feel my anguish. My husband, although he himself was fighting with his own demons after his accident, tried to reassure me. "Tanya, you are strong. Someone will recognize your potential," he said to me. These words were comforting, but the financial reality was overwhelming. Each bill that arrived at the house seemed to weigh tons on my shoulders. One evening, as I sat at the table with my children for dinner, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken words. They were so happy to see me, but I knew that behind their smiles hid a worry. They deserved better than this. I took a deep breath and decided to talk to them. "Kids, I know things are difficult right now, but we are going to get through this," I said. They nodded, but I saw in their eyes that they felt the tension. The following days, I continued to look for jobs, but nothing seemed to come. Then, an opportunity presented itself. A friend told me about a position in a small company, and I decided to take my chance. I prepared my resume carefully, making sure to highlight my skills. On the day of the interview, I was nervous, but I knew that I had to believe in myself. The interview went fairly well, even if I was aware that the competition was tough. I put all my heart into my answers, trying to show that I could be an asset to the company. At the end, I left the room with a mixture of hope and anxiety, waiting to receive news. A few days later, I received a call. I held my breath as I answered. It was the human resources manager. "Congratulations, Tanya. We have selected you for the position." My heart exploded with joy, but this was quickly followed by a wave of anxiety. Of course, I was happy, but I knew that I had to juggle this new job with my family responsibilities. The next day, I went home with a big smile, eager to announce the news to my husband. When I told him, his eyes lit up. "That's great, Tanya. I knew you would make it." We celebrated this small success together, but deep down I knew that it wouldn't be that simple. I was full of hope, but also of anguish. I wondered if I could manage this new job while continuing to support my family. The challenges were just beginning. The first day at my new job, I was nervous and excited. I arrived early, eager to make a good impression. The atmosphere was different from that of my old job. My new colleagues seemed welcoming, and I quickly felt at home. I started to regain confidence in myself, to believe that things would finally improve for my family. However, from the beginning, I noticed that there was a colleague, Mark, who paid particular attention to me. At first, I thought he was simply friendly, but over the days, his compliments became more insistent. "Tanya, you are truly an incredible person. I admire your determination," he said with a charming smile. I was often surprised to blush. It had been so long since I had received attention of this kind, and I must admit that it flattered me. One evening after work, Mark offered me a drink to discuss future projects. I was hesitant. I loved my husband, and I knew that I shouldn't let myself be drawn in. But the idea of going out, of talking with someone who seemed genuinely interested in me, was tempting. After a few minutes of reflection, I accepted, thinking that it was just a friendly outing. At the bar, the conversation was fluid. Mark was funny and captivating. I was surprised to laugh and relax. It was a welcome escape from my daily worries. But as I sank deeper into the discussion, I couldn't ignore a small voice deep inside me that told me to be careful. I was married and had children, but the temptation to have a moment of levity was strong. As the evening progressed, Mark moved closer. I remember a moment when he brushed my hand while laughing. My heart skipped a beat. I knew that I had to put an end to this, but a part of me wanted to continue enjoying this attention. Finally, I decided to end the evening. "Thank you for this outing, but I think I should go home," I said, getting up. Mark seemed disappointed, but he understood. I left the bar feeling a mixture of relief and guilt. I promised myself not to give in to these distractions again. I had to be strong for my family, but in the following days the temptation only grew. Mark continued to court me, and each interaction became a small inner battle. I didn't like it. I wanted to be faithful to my husband, but Mark's attention was like a breath of fresh air in my monotonous life. One evening, as I was going home, I wondered if I could really ignore this attraction. Was it a simple flirtation or something more serious? I knew that I had to make a choice. The question was, what would be the consequence of this choice? The days passed, and the tension between my feelings for Mark and my commitment to my family reached its climax. Each interaction with him was a new ordeal. I felt a surge of excitement when I saw him. But at the same time, an overwhelming guilt stifled me. I knew that I couldn't let this situation spiral out of control. One Friday evening, as I was coming home from work, I made a decision. I had to talk to my husband. It was difficult, but I knew that I couldn't continue to juggle my emotions without telling him. I wanted to be honest, even if it meant revealing flaws in our marriage. When I got home, I found him in the living room, watching a football game. I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was going to say could change our dynamic. "Honey, can you put that on pause for a moment? I need to talk to you." His expression changed. He understood that it was serious. I sat down next to him, and with a heavy heart, I began to explain what had happened since I had started this new job. I told him about Mark, about the attention he was paying me, and about how it had made me feel. I saw the pain in his eyes, but also understanding. He knew that life wasn't easy for me. After a moment of silence, he replied, "Tanya, I understand that you are looking for some comfort. I want you to be happy, but I don't want you to lose yourself along the way." These words touched me. He was aware of my struggles and temptations, but he didn't want me to make the mistake of betraying our marriage. This conversation was a turning point. By sharing my doubts, I realized that my family was my priority. I loved my husband and my children, and I couldn't sacrifice our happiness for a temporary escape. I promised him to stay focused on what really mattered. In the days that followed, I took steps to put distance between myself and Mark. I clearly made him understand that I wasn't interested in anything more than a simple friendship. The decision was difficult, but I knew that it was the right one. Finally, with the support of my husband, I managed to focus on my new life, my children, and my career. Each day was a new challenge, but I felt stronger and more determined. The lessons that I had learned had shaped me, and I knew now that true love demanded patience, understanding, and an unwavering commitment. Although the temptation was always present, I knew that I could overcome my weaknesses. I am Tanya, a married woman, and despite the challenges, I am ready to build a bright future for my family. Tanya's story is a true reflection of the daily struggles that many of us face while going through difficult times. It reminds us of the importance of staying true to our core values and to those we love. When times get tough, it is essential to prioritize family. Tanya understood that her love for her husband and her children had to come before any temptation. Temptations can arise in various forms, often when you least expect it. Tanya felt the seduction of Mark's attention, but she also recognized that it was essential to keep her commitments intact. Open communication with her husband was a pillar in her story. By sharing her doubts and struggles, she strengthened the trust between them, which allowed them to overcome the obstacles together. Learning from our mistakes is another key lesson. Each experience, even the most painful ones, can be an opportunity to grow. Tanya faced her weaknesses and decided to make informed decisions, thus demonstrating admirable inner strength. Surrounding herself with caring and positive people has also played a crucial role in her redemption, providing her with the necessary support to move forward. Finally, Tanya's journey teaches us that courage and determination can transform our trials into life lessons. With a sincere heart and thoughtful choices, she was able to build a better future for herself and her family.